So what is the fixed rate of interest and what is the floating rate of interest, Ankit? Right. Ankit, what is your background? How do you know about LIBOR and MIBOR? So what did you read about LIBOR? Offered rate. London Interbank Offered Rate. Hmm. Then you are inviting trouble after trouble. First you said LIBOR and MIBOR, then you said overnight call rate. Okay, I'll be explaining as it is all this. So first let us start with LIBOR. LIBOR is an international benchmark interest rate which ruled the world till 31st of December 2021. Okay, I'll come to that. LIBOR is London Interbank Offered Rate. Hmm. So in the international market, when you borrow, it's a benchmark rate, so your rate is linked with LIBOR. LIBOR has a rate. Suppose LIBOR is presently 0.5%, say. Okay, LIBOR on US dollar. So if you want to borrow, suppose US dollar in London, suppose JP Morgan is operating in London. JP Morgan says, I can lend you at LIBOR plus 2%. So that means today if LIBOR is 0.5, you will be paying 2.5%. Tomorrow if LIBOR becomes 1%, you have to pay 3%. Again, if it goes up to 1.5, you have to pay, or 1.25, you have to pay 3.25%. Because this LIBOR plus 2%, 2 is fixed. LIBOR, when it changes, you have to pay either a higher rate of interest or a lower rate of interest. Like it can go up, it can also go down. Okay. Now, when you borrow money so this is called floating rate loan. Why? Because your rate of interest can change depending upon a benchmark rate. And what is a fixed rate loan? Suppose same JP Morgan offers you a fixed rate of loan of 3.5%. So you are taking a loan for a period of 10 years. So over this period of 10 years, your interest rate will remain as 3.5% irrespective of the change in LIBOR or other things. Now LIBOR used to change every day, but your rate of interest will not change every day. So when you borrow money, there will be an agreement after how many days your LIBOR will be reset. Okay. Now how LIBOR is determined? Every day at 11 o'clock London time. Every day at 11 o'clock London time, Bankers Association used to take a rate from 16 major banks operating in London. What do you mean by used to take rate from 16 major banks operating in London? That is the rate at which they are ready to lend, the rate at which they are ready to borrow. After taking rates from 16 major banks, the highest 4 and lowest 4 were eliminated, and the average of middle 8 used to become the LIBOR for the day. We had LIBOR for all major currencies. Like if you want to borrow dollar, there is a LIBOR for it. If you want to borrow euro, there is a LIBOR rate for it. So you have LIBOR rate for all major currencies. Similarly, you have LIBOR rate for different 10 years. Like you borrow for borrow for 7 days, you have one rate of interest. Borrow for a month, one rate of interest. Borrow for 1 year, one rate of interest. Borrow for 5 years, one rate of interest, and so on. Okay. Sometimes in 2011-12, so there was some problem with LIBOR. That is, some banks, including JP Morgan, Barclays, UBS, they fudged this LIBOR rate. So So you can give a search and find out the scam of LIBOR and all. They fudged the LIBOR rate, and as a result, these banks are penalized also. As a result, the UK authority, that is, Federal Bank of England, they appointed one agency who started publishing LIBOR. Okay. However, they announced that from 31st of December 2021, LIBOR will be discontinued. They will have other benchmark rates. So now there are other benchmark rates with which floating rate loans are linked. So I'll show you some of the international benchmark rate. So first of all, what is LIBOR is clear. Any question? It ruled the world for a long period of time. So apart from LIBOR, there are other benchmark rates. I'll talk about them. You have by this time, what is a fixed rate loan and what is a floating rate loan? That is clear. Any question? Yeah. So fixed rate loan, your rate of interest will remain fixed throughout the tenure of the loan. Floating rate loan, your rate of interest will change depending upon the change in the benchmark rate of loan. So Ankit also talked about another benchmark, another item called MIBOR. Ankit, what is MIBOR? In offered rate. So basically, what is this Mumbai Interbank offered rate? So if there is another name for Mumbai Interbank offered rate called call rate or call money market. So if every day the banks borrow from each other in a market called call money market. Okay, so the rate is it is a volatile market. So you see, for example, now 1027 State Bank of India, it has a deposit of say 100 crores, but there is a demand for loan of 125 crores. So what State Bank of India will do? It will say that I don't have 25 crores, you go to some other bank. No, State Bank of India will borrow 25 crores from another bank which has a surplus for a period of 1 day. Why for a period of 1 day? Tomorrow State Bank can have, why tomorrow? After 1 hour, within a period of 1 hour, State Bank might have a surplus. Okay. So suppose you borrow for a period of 1 day. So it can go maximum for 14 days. So this is called call money market, and everyday call rates are published. Another name for call money market is called MIBOR. It is not a policy rate. Policy rates are those which are determined by the monetary authority. So for a long period of time in India, we had different, now also we have different rates, but initially it was PLR, prime lending rate, the rate at which one bank used to borrow from another bank. Okay. So when we, the customers, used to borrow from banks at floating rate, so it used to be linked with PLR. Suppose you borrow at a floating rate, suppose PLR plus 2%. Okay. So for a long period of time, PLR ruled the world, but once what happened, RBI, and everybody used, when you can borrow from now, if your bank borrows from a bank, the rate of interest will be definitely lowest. Now this PLR also depends upon the cost of the funds of the banks. So and the cost of the funds also depends upon the policy rates like repo, reverse repo. Okay, what is repo and what is reverse repo?
Sir, the repo rate is at which banks lend from the RBI, and reverse repo is
bank borrows from RBI.
Bank borrows from RBI.
And reverse repo is the rate where banks can park their surplus fund with RBI. So repo is a policy rate. So RBI, why RBI? Like we have repo, reverse repo, they have Federal Reserve has also rate policy rates and all. So by changing these rates, the central bank can control the money supply in the economy, and they can take different measures like control inflation, etc., etc. So, but banks can also borrow from RBI at repo rate. So if the repo rate goes up or goes down, the cost of funds of the banks will also go up or go down. It will be affected. So when the RBI, suppose RBI reduces the rate of interest, okay, repo rate. So the cost of funds of the bank should also go down. What happened was these banks, they never passed on this benefit to the customers. Okay, so what they used to do, suppose you borrowed at PLR. Now PLR though you cannot fudge. Suppose State Bank of India's PLR is coming to 5%. So now there is a change in the repo rate, so PLR will also go down, but theoretically, but you will not be given that benefit. So now what happens? They introduce something called sub PLR, this rate, that rate, reference rate. So there are many rates. So when Raghuram Rajan was the governor of RBI, high profile governor, at that time we also had a high profile chairperson of State Bank of India, Arundhati Bhattacharya. So once Raghuram Rajan announced that after reducing the repo rate, Raghuram Rajan said that since we have reduced the repo rate, now banks should pass this benefit to the consumers. So that means the housing loan and other loans, the interest rate should also come down. But at that moment, Arundhati Bhattacharya made a counter statement that in India, cost of funds of the banks, it does not depend upon only repo rate. Okay. So then central bank as well as other committees, they started thinking what is the solution. So they came out with something called MCLR, marginal cost of lending rate. So banks started lending, all banks, it was compulsory to lend at marginal cost of lending rate. Now what happens, just before the pandemic, our present governor, Mr. Shaktikanta Das, he also observed that though he reduced the rate of interest, that is repo rate, but that benefit was not passed on to the consumers. So now he insisted that banks should lend at floating rate of interest should be linked with, instead of MCLR, should be linked with repo rate. So initially for some period of time, banks were lending at, floating rates were linked with repo rate. But now some banks are MCLR, some banks are repo. And, there are, they will, most, including the National Airways, they will try to, take more money, definitely. Thing is, in India, there are many benchmark rates. Okay. So mostly when you go to a bank for borrowing, for housing or other things, it will be either linked with MCLR presently or linked with repo. So that is the present situation which is going. So when you talk about the benchmark rate in the international market, there are many. There are many in the sense, let me tell you, show you some. Just so can you see the what file?
Yes, sir.
So basically this is your some of the benchmark rates. Some of the benchmark rates. One is a bank rate below which you cannot lend. Federal Reserve, US Federal Reserve has an overnight rate. Then there are Brazilian rate. IONA is overnight index rate. So there are many. So this is the one London interbank rate we have talked about. Now this is the one which is slowly becoming popular and replacing LIBOR. So there is one, see, Sonia Starling overnight index rate. This is the UK. So it depends upon which country you are borrowing and which currency you are borrowing and which country you are borrowing. So for LIBOR ruled the entire world for a long period of time. Now different countries have different benchmark rates. As I've told you, Indian cases. So similarly this. So any question up to this point? So we talked about different, what is a fixed rate loan, what is a floating rate loan. We also talked about the different benchmark rates. We have also talked about LIBOR. Any question up to this point? Anybody? Ankit?
Sir, in India, will we go for MIBOR?
MIBOR is between two banks. If you go to a bank and if you say that I want to borrow which will be linked with MIBOR, bank will not lend you. Bank will say I am giving you MIBOR only, but that will not be MIBOR. MIBOR is between two banks. So different countries, different rate of interest have different ways of calculation. Like LIBOR, I have told you, that is how LIBOR is calculated. Since London is an international hub, MIBOR it depends upon the demand and supply in the money market. It's a one-day rate. Of course, one-day rate does not depend only on one day's demand and supply. So somebody anyway, let us not talk about so much about MIBOR. But in India, MIBOR we can use, like normally when we value the interest rate product, because interest rate, there are many products which normally we do at the time of derivative. So there, in one case, we use MIBOR for valuing the product. But otherwise, for loans, either it is currently, if it is a floating rate loan, it is currently either in India, either at marginal cost of lending rate or at repo, especially the housing loans. That's the one which is most popular among the retail customers. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So consider a case. Section D. Yeah. So consider a case. Suppose RIL borrows say euro 100 million from a UBS. UBS being an international bank is also operating in London for 5 years at Euribor plus 2%. So what do you mean by this? RIL has taken a loan of 100 million euro from UBS for 5 years at Euribor plus 2%. So today, if Euribor is, so over a period of time, RIL will have to pay interest for a period of 5 years, and at the end of fifth year, RIL will repay 100 million euro to UBS. Now today, only condition is if Euribor changes, RIL will have to pay the change rate of interest. Suppose today Euribor is 0.5%, so RIL will be paying 2.5% on 100 million euro. Tomorrow, if Euribor becomes 1.25%, RIL will have to pay 1.25 plus 2, that is 1.25 million on, that is 1.25 on a 1.25, 1.25 plus 2 is 3.25. So 3.25% on 100 million, that is 3.25 million to UBS. Similarly, if Euribor falls to 0.25%, RIL will be paying 2.25% on 100 million, that is 2.25 million to UBS, and so on. So basically, RIL's, how much interest RIL will be paying, one portion, 2% is fixed, of course, but it depends upon Euribor. So Euribor, whenever Euribor will change, RIL's rate of interest will change. Now, if that happens, one thing you can make out that if it falls, it is good for RIL, but if it goes down, if Euribor goes up, instead of going down, if it goes up, it's a risk for RIL, yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So if that happens, what do you do? How do you save yourself?
So we need to hedge.
So hedging on, it's a question of hedging of risk. So how do you manage your risk? So if Euribor goes down, it is profit. But here I'm not talking about profit. We are talking about risk. So where is the risk if Euribor goes up? So consider this case. Suppose RIL enters into an agreement with State Bank of India where RIL will pay fixed, say 3% to 3% on euro 100 million to SBI for 5 years. I'll write SBI, and SBI will pay RIL Euribor plus % on euro 100 million, euro 100 million for 5 years. Let me explain. RIL is afraid of the change in the rate of interest. What do you mean by afraid of the change in the rate of interest? If Euribor goes up, RIL will be ending up paying more money in the sense RIL will be ending up paying more interest to UBS. In order to manage this risk or in order to save itself from increase in the rate of interest, RIL enters into an agreement with State Bank of India where RIL will be paying a fixed rate of fixed 3% on 100 million, that is 3 million euro every year to State Bank of India, and in return State Bank of India will pay RIL Euribor plus 2%. So basic idea is, so if you say netted 2% netted, so RIL will be paying 1% to State Bank of India, and State Bank of India will pay Euribor to RIL. So today if Euribor is 0.5, RIL will be paying 1% on 100 million to State Bank of India, and in return State Bank of India will pay 0.5% on 100 million to RIL. So tomorrow if Euribor becomes 1.5%, RIL will be paying 1.5% to RIL will be paying still 1% to State Bank of India, but State Bank of India will be paying 1.5% to RIL. So basically the amount which RIL is going to pay is fixed at 3%. I repeat, the RIL's cost is restricted to 3%. So how RIL is restricting its cost to 3%? It is entering into an agreement with State Bank of India where it will pay 3% fixed to State Bank of India, and in return it will pay Euribor plus 2%, which is required to pay UBS. So whatever amount RIL is paying to UBS, which is floating, is coming from State Bank of India, and RIL is making its payable to State Bank of India fixed at 3%. Okay, so in the process, RIL's cost is fixed at 3%. Of course, RIL will not be benefited if the rate of Euribor goes down. Okay, so profit and loss both are transferred to State Bank of India. Here we are more bothered about the loss, not the profit. Make sense? Yes or no? Make sense?
Yes, sir. Sir, I have a doubt.
Yes.
Sir, will the payments happen on a monthly basis?
So in the agreement, they will make that they will under in what interval the Euribor will be reset.
Okay. So on that day of the interval, like if at all after 1 month, on that day, if we'll be considering the Euribor rate, right? Euribor plus 2%.
See, whenever you borrow money, so there are a lot of agreement, lot of rule, this thing, what do you call terms and conditions. So if you go to a bank and borrow money, bank will give you some terms and conditions which blindly you sign. But when it's a case of two corporates, they can always negotiate. Suppose RIL is borrowing from UBS, where it is mentioned that Euribor will be reset after it will be reset quarterly. So RIL will also try to enter into a similar kind of agreement where it will be reset quarterly. Now depends upon that. Now UBS does not know anything about it. UBS does not come into the picture. This is basically between RIL and State Bank of India. UBS will be happy in receiving Euribor plus 2% on 100 million euro. That's all. I will explain you why State Bank of India will enter into an agreement with RIL. That will come later, but the structure is clear.
Yes, sir.
Any question, confusion? Anybody? Anybody? Okay. So why State Bank of India will be entering into a contract, will bear the risk? Here one thing is, I told you, that is risk and return both are transferred to State Bank of India. So one thing you can make out, like State Bank of India, it will get the benefit of, it will bear the, it will bear the loss if the interest rate goes up, if Euribor goes up. Similarly, it will also be benefited from the profit if the interest rate goes down. Always remember, at the inception of the swap, the value of the swap to both the parties must be same. Otherwise, there will be no contract. Why the value of the swap to both the parties must be same? Because if RIL thinks that State Bank of India is charging more, RIL will not enter into the contract. Similarly, if State Bank of India thinks that RIL is paying less, State Bank of India will also not enter into the contract. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
So first of all, and another thing is when RIL is thinking the rate of interest will go up, State Bank probably is thinking that rate of interest will not go up. Number one. Number two is another possibilities which State Bank of India, normally the banks, they don't speculate. So what State Bank can do, like RIL has gone to State Bank of India where it wanted to convert a floating rate loan to a fixed rate loan. RIL borrowed in floating, but it is converting its loan to fixed. Similarly, there may be another company, say Tata Steel, which may borrow in fixed, and they want to convert that fixed rate loan to floating rate loan. That is also possible. Okay. So what is happening in case of State Bank of India? On one side, it is converting a floating rate loan to fixed rate loan, and on the other side, it is converting a fixed rate loan to a floating rate loan. In the process, the position of State Bank of India is neutral, and it will make profit by the margin from both the banks. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
So this is what is called a simple form of interest rate swap. We have some other kind of interest rate swap which I will definitely do with a case where here this interest rate swap is used in order to manage the risk. I repeat, here the interest rate swap is used in order to manage the risk. What is the risk if the rate of interest goes up? So we'll also do interest rate swap where two companies can enter into interest rate swap in order to make profit. Make profit means reducing the cost of borrowing. Okay, so that also we'll do. So what is a currency swap? So as you know, the word swap is used to mean the dictionary meaning is exchange. So currency swap is basically exchanging the currency. So consider a case. Suppose same RIL borrows $100 million at the rate of 4% for 5 years. Okay. Fine. Now, in that case, what are from Citibank. So what RIL has to do in this case? So here it is fixed 4%. Do you know there was a time? What is the current housing rate of interest in India? Housing loan? Any idea? What is the current
Sir, around 8%.
housing loans? Less than 7%. Okay. And a floating rate is around 6 point something. So there was a time, the first time I borrowed for a house was 16.5. It had gone up to more than 17, then came down to 7.5. Okay. So what happened is, when the rate of interest was going down, at that time, most of the banks, they used to lend at fixed. When the rate of interest had gone down, so banks were not reducing the rate of interest. So people were paying higher rate of interest. So what they had done, so most of the customers, they borrowed from another bank and repaid this old loan. Okay. So banks were losing customers, so they started doing that on their own. That is, you pay a fee your loan will be converted to a floating rate or a reduced rate of interest. So now that is also common now. Sometimes your banks, they do not pass on the benefits to their old customers. So sometimes that happens. Anyway, we are talking about currency swap. Okay. So in this case, what happens is, suppose RIL borrows $100 million at the rate of 4% for 5 years. So every year, RIL has to pay 4% on 100 million as interest. That is, first at the end of first year, 4 million. At the end of second year, 4 million. At the end of third year, 4 million. At the end of fourth year, 4 million. At the end of fifth year, 4 million plus another 100 million of principal amount. That is total 104 million. Any question?
No, sir.
Today exchange rate is $1 is equal to 75. Do you think this exchange rate will be there for the rest remaining 5 years? Definitely not. Exchange rate will change. Now, if the exchange rate goes down, if Indian rupee appreciates, like suppose today $1 is equal to 75 rupees. If $1 remains as from 75, if it becomes 74, it is good for RIL. But if Indian rupee depreciates, suppose $1 from 75, it becomes 76, RIL will end up paying more money. Okay. So how can you manage your risk? So RIL, we talked about forward contract. So RIL can buy 5 forward contracts. What are the forward contracts? Suppose RIL goes to State Bank of India and says, I want to buy $4 million at the end of first year, $4 million at the end of second year, $4 million at the end of third year, $4 million at the end of fourth year, and $104 million at the end of fifth year. So 5 forward contracts, yes or no? So another thing of swap is it's a series of cash flow. Swap is not a single cash flow. So when I enter into 5 different forward contracts, so where RIL will be, what are the cash flows? From RIL side, it will be rupee outflow and dollar inflow. I repeat, from RIL side, it is rupee outflow and dollar inflow. This can also be considered as this or called as currency swap, where you enter into a 5 forward contract. However, it can also be done in a different way, which I will show you. So one is RIL will be paying in rupees but receiving in dollars from State Bank of India. So whatever RIL is actually paying to Citibank, that is coming from State Bank of India in this case, where RIL enters into 5 forward contracts. Question? Anybody?
No, sir.
So suppose RIL thinks that US economy is reviving, so US dollar can appreciate against Indian rupee. I repeat, US economy is reviving, US dollar can appreciate against Indian rupee, but suppose RIL thinks that, so if US dollar appreciates against Indian rupee, so naturally Indian rupee will depreciate against US dollar. So RIL will end up paying more if it is a dollar loan. Suppose RIL thinks that, okay, Indian rupee will depreciate against US dollar, but it will appreciate or it will be stable against euro. So RIL approaches State Bank of Citibank that, okay, I have borrowed dollar from you, but I'll repay you in euro. Citibank, being an international bank, agrees to this proposal. Okay. So RIL is borrowing in a dollar loan and repaying in euro. This is also a currency swap. How much euro? That will be decided by 2 of them today only. Okay. Yes or no? Any question? Anybody? Concept clear? Aditya?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
But consider this case, how the interest rate swap takes place. Consider this case where RIL borrowed $100 million from Citibank New York at the rate of 4% for 5 years. Now it goes for a currency swap to SBI. So that means it will be paying rupee INR to SBI, and in return SBI will pay dollar. Now today's exchange rate is 45. So if I convert that into equivalent rupee loan, 45 into 100, 4,500. Or in other words, what we calculated earlier, that is RIL can enter into 5 forward contracts with another bank. What are the 5 forward contracts? $4 million at the end of each year for 4 years, and at the end of 5th year, $104 million. Okay. So instead of doing that, RIL goes to State Bank of India and says that I will pay you in rupees, you pay me in dollar. Immediately State Bank of India will say, okay, what is the equivalent amount of rupee loan? 100 into 40, that is 4,500 million. So you have to pay me interest on 4,500 million because it is in rupees. And you have to also pay me the interest which is applicable for rupee, 8%. So what will be the cash flows? RIL will be paying 8% on 4,500 million. That is 360 million at the end of first year, 360 million at the end of second year, 360 million at the end of third year, 360 million at the end of fourth year, and 360 million at the end of fifth year, another 4,500 million at the end of fifth year. In return, RIL will be receiving $4 million at the end of first year, $4 million at the end of second year, $4 million at the end of third year, 4 at the end of fourth year, and $4 million at the end of fifth year. Along with that, another $100 million principal amount. Any question up to this point? When RIL goes for a currency swap between rupee and dollar, $100 million is equivalent to 4,500 million rupees. And RIL will have to pay interest at the rate of 8%. Why? That is the applicable rate of interest for INR. So 8% on 4,500 million, this is RIL's outflow. And this is RIL's inflow. So even if the exchange rate fluctuates, RIL will not be affected because it is converting its dollar loan to a rupee loan where it is paying in INR and receiving dollar. So whatever money it has to pay to Citibank New York, that is coming from State Bank of India. So I told you earlier also that at the inception of the swap, the value of the swap to both the parties must be same. So if you find the value of the swap, so what is the value of RIL's payable? This is RIL's payable. So they will be discounted. If you find the present value of this, so they will be discounted at the rate of 8%. So if you do that, the value is coming to 4,500 because 8% is the rate of interest. On the other hand, if you try to find the present value of the RIL's receivable, which is in dollars, if you try to find the present value, they will be discounted at the rate of 4% because that is the rate of interest applicable to dollar. So that this present value is coming to $100 million. If you find the present value, if you convert it into Indian rupee, today's exchange rate is 45, 100 into 45, 4,500. So RIL's receivable is 4,500, RIL's payable is 4,500. As I have told you, that is at the inception, the value of the swap must be same, 0 or equal to both the parties. Question, confusion? Any question?
No, sir.
Is that clear? So this is what is called a simple form of currency swap. There can be others. As I have told you, you can borrow in US dollar, repay in euro, but whenever you go. But of course, now why RIL? If you think that why it will pay, why it will pay in what do you call 8%, or why it will be converting. So if you try to find out, so the forward rate, what will be the 1 year forward rate? Forward rate will be equal to spot rate into 1 plus GIR. divided by 1 plus FIR. So suppose RIL wants to buy 5 forward contracts. So first year rate will be this. What will be second year rate? F into spot rate.
Sir, F equal to
Spot rate into 1 plus DIR divided by 2 1 plus FIR 2. Make sense?
yes, sir.
So naturally, the rate of interest is taken into account. So similarly, if you so third year it will be 3 P. Fourth year it will be 4 4. Fifth year it will be 5. What is your DIR? 8% here. What is your FIR? 4%. So one will be definitely you can make out one will be discounted at 8%. One will be discounted at 4%. Make sense? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Question, confusion? Anybody? So can we start a case on interest rate swap? So till now whatever we have done is basically interest rate swap or currency swap which are there in order to manage risk. How you can use interest rate swap or currency swap in order to make profit. Today probably we will not be able to cover both, but probably at least we can cover interest rate swap. Can you start?
Yes, sir.
So consider this case, Vodafone and DLF. Let me change it. See, Vodafone and DLF both want to raise 100 crores for 5 years. Vodafone wants a fixed rate of interest and DLF wants a floating rate of interest. Now, why Vodafone wants a fixed rate? It's Vodafone's problem, not ours. Why Vodafone wants a fixed rate? That is Vodafone's problem. Why DLF wants a floating rate? That is DLF's problem. Okay, so let me just change from PLR to MCLR. Then I'll get back to you. Just let me change MCLR, MCLR, MCLR. Okay. So first see this problem. Just 1 minute. See this problem. So Vodafone and DLF both want to raise how much? 100 crores for 5 years. Vodafone wants a fixed rate of interest and DLF wants a floating rate of interest. Okay. So for Vodafone, now the question is why Vodafone wants a fixed rate and why Vodafone wants a floating rate. That is their problem, not ours. But the thing is, one wants a fixed rate, one wants a floating rate. Okay. If Vodafone borrows at fixed rate, it will have to pay 12%. That is the rate offered to Vodafone. And if Vodafone borrows at floating rate, it will have to pay MCLR plus 2%. On the other hand, if DLF, which wants a loan in floating, if DLF borrows at fixed rate, it will have to pay 9%. If DLF borrows at floating, it will have to pay MCLR plus 0.5%. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Why this change in the rate? DLF has a better credit rating, huh? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Now, one thing you can make out. Now, the point is here the difference is lot. In the actual life, difference will not be so much. So to get a better figure, we have done that. So one thing you can make out, DLF has an absolute advantage in both the rates. Huh? Sorry. DLF has an absolute advantage in both the rates. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is it possible that DLF will borrow for itself 100 million, 100 crore for itself and 100 crore for Vodafone? DLF goes to the bank and says, I want 200 crores. So DLF will give 100 crores. It wants a loan in floating. So it will give 100 crores for itself and it will lend 100 crores at this rate or whatever is the rate to Vodafone. Is it possible? Or forget about profit. Suppose DLF goes to a bank and says, I want to borrow 100 crores at floating rate and 100 crores at fixed rate. Possible?
Yes, sir.
Is it? It is possible, no? Who said just now, yes, sir?
Sir, Nikhil.
Nikhil. Acha, Nikhil, have you taken an education loan?
No, sir. Not yet. I have to.
You will have to.
Yes, for the second year.
For the second year, whatever it is. So when you go to borrow, can you borrow from, say, somebody, Aditya? You go to the bank and can you say that, whatever is the amount? Suppose I want to borrow 10 lakhs for me and 10 lakhs for Aditya. Can you do that?
Sir, even for Aditya, I need to show the collateral. Then I can.
Why should you borrow for Aditya?
For making profit. Because, like...
Is it your business to make profit?
No.
Is it DLF's business to make profit by borrowing at a lower rate and just, lending at a higher rate? Because This business is whose business? Bank's business. DLF's business is something else. If DLF enters into, see, there is a risk involved also. Yeah. What is the risk? Risk of default. Okay, so DLF, its business is something. Its business is not borrowing at a lower rate and lending at a higher rate. And most important thing is when DLF will go to bank. See, when you will go to bank, bank will not look at you, your face, and give you the loan. Bank will definitely see all the purpose where you are studying everything, and on the basis of that, bank will see the requirement and accordingly give the loan. So when you go, suppose the total course fee is 20 lakhs and first year is over, suppose you go there and you want to borrow 10 lakhs. And instead of 10 lakhs, as soon as you try to borrow 20 lakhs, bank will definitely ask you, why 20 lakhs? Why do you need 20 lakhs? You say that I want to borrow 10 lakhs for myself and 10 lakhs for Aditya. Bank will say, no, you borrow for yourself. Aditya, let Aditya come to me and I will lend Aditya separately. Got it? It's simple term. Similarly, if DLF goes to any bank and says that I want to borrow for myself and I borrow for Vodafone, no bank will do that. Bank will give you a loan on the basis of your requirement and on the collateral which you keep.
Sir, what if I inflate the things?
Inflate what?
Like I want to give 100 crores to Vodafone, but I will ask for 200 and I will show the purpose of the same. Then in that case?
So I have the second logic. What is the second logic? That is, the business of DLF is not to borrow from one place and lend it to another place. So there are intercorporate loans available. That is, one company can give loan to another company. That is available in the market. Intercorporate loan. But again, once you do that, you enter into a trouble. Huh? So what is the trouble? Trouble is you are into risk of default, which is not your business. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
So one thing is clear, DLF cannot borrow for itself and also borrow for Vodafone. If it does, it is into banking business, not in this. So can I say DLF has an absolute advantage in both the rates? Yes or no? Here also it is less, here also it is less.
Yes, sir, it has.
Can I say that Vodafone has a comparative advantage in floating rate over fixed rate? I repeat, I am saying DLF has an absolute advantage in both the rates. Fine. But can I say Vodafone has a comparative advantage in floating rate over fixed rate? Why? When compared with DLF. Here Vodafone is paying 1.5% more when compared with DLF. Here Vodafone is paying 3% more when it's compared with DLF. So I'm comparing only Vodafone and DLF and fixed rate and floating rate. So Vodafone has an absolute disadvantage. When DLF has an absolute advantage, Vodafone has a complete disadvantage. Like oil producing countries, they have a complete advantage, absolute advantage. But when you compare with certain products, other countries have comparative advantage. So here Vodafone has a comparative advantage in floating rate over fixed rate when compared with DLF. Yes or no? I said Vodafone has a comparative advantage in floating rate over fixed rate. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
So when I say Vodafone has a comparative advantage in floating rate, it automatically means Vodafone has a comparative disadvantage in fixed rate.
Yes, sir.
If Vodafone has a comparative disadvantage in fixed rate, DLF has a comparative advantage in fixed rate.
Yes, sir.
So what do we say at the end? Vodafone has a comparative advantage in floating rate, DLF has a comparative advantage in fixed rate. So let me present it from other angle. DLF has an absolute advantage in both the rates. So when you try to find out where from DLF angles, if you try to find out where it has a comparative advantage, since it has an absolute advantage, when you look from DLF's angle, so we'll see where it is gaining more. It is gaining more in fixed rate. Why? Here it is paying 3% less. Here it is paying 1.5% less. So it is gaining more here. So DLF has a comparative advantage in fixed rate, though it has an absolute advantage. What about Vodafone? Vodafone has an absolute disadvantage. So when you see the disadvantage, there you see where it has less disadvantage. So you can see here it has less disadvantage. Why? Here it is paying 1.5% more. Here it is paying 3% more. So we conclude that Vodafone has a comparative advantage in floating rate and DLF has a comparative advantage in fixed rate. Anybody has any confusion? Tell me, please. Anybody? Any question?
No, sir.
So whatever we have discussed, from the above information, we find that DLF has an absolute advantage in both rates, but Vodafone has a comparative advantage in floating rate loan, as the difference is 1.5%. So therefore, DLF has a comparative advantage in fixed rate loan, as the difference is 3%. Okay. Now, what is Vodafone's requirement? Fixed rate. I repeat, what is Vodafone's requirement? Fixed rate loan. So if Vodafone borrows as per its requirement, it has to pay 12%. What is DLF's requirement? Floating rate loan. If DLF borrows as per its requirement, it will be paying MCLR plus 0.5%. So together they will be paying 12% Vodafone, DLF, MCLR plus 0.5%, total MCLR plus 12.5%. I repeat, Vodafone's requirement is fixed rate loan. So Vodafone, if it borrows at fixed rate, it will be paying 12%. DLF's requirement is floating rate loan. If DLF borrows in floating rate, it will be paying MCLR plus 0.5%. Together, they will be paying MCLR plus 12.5%. But we talked about comparative advantage. Vodafone has a comparative advantage in floating rate. So if it borrows in comparative advantage, it will be paying MCLR plus 2%. DLF's comparative advantage is fixed, so it will be paying 9%. So we write, however, if they borrow as per the rate where each has a comparative advantage, the total borrowing cost will be, Vodafone will be borrowing at floating rate MCLR plus 2, DLF will be borrowing at fixed 9%. Total, they will be paying MCLR plus 11%. So there is a saving of MCLR plus 12.5 minus MCLR plus 11, which is 1.5%. So there is a saving, but if I do that, their requirement is violated. Why? Vodafone's requirement is 12. You can save only when Vodafone borrows in floating, but it wanted to borrow in fixed. DLF, we can save, DLF wanted to borrow in floating, but if it borrows in fixed, then only there is a saving. So we have to make sure that we save, but Vodafone, it wanted to borrow in fixed, it pays fixed rate of interest. DLF, it wanted to borrow in floating, it also pays floating rate of interest. So we have to make an arrangement in such a way that Vodafone ends up paying in fixed rate, DLF ends up paying in floating rate. As things stand now, Vodafone borrowed in floating rate, DLF borrowed in fixed rate. Any question up to this point?
No, sir.
But if they save 1.5%, normally, this Vodafone and DLF, it is not necessary that they will know each other. Vodafone can be in South Africa and DLF can be in Caribbean island. So two of them can be at two different places. So if I assume that this saving of 1.5%, and normally this deal is done through a third party called swap bank. I repeat, normally this deal is done through a third party called a swap bank. Now, swap bank can not necessarily, it will be a bank only. It can be a bank, it can be an investment bank. Basically, it is an intermediary bringing both the parties. Okay. Okay. So, if I assume this saving of 1.5% is shared by Vodafone, DLF and the swap bank equally. So each gets 0.5%, yes or no? There is a total saving of 1.5%. If I assume that saving of 1.5% is shared by them equally, so each gets 0.5%.
Yes, sir.
So Vodafone actually wanted to borrow at 12%. Why it is entering into so much of problem or so much of swap? It wants to reduce this cost. So if it gains 0.5%, its cost will be reduced to 12 minus 0.5, that is 11.5%. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Similarly, DLF, it wanted to borrow at MCLR plus 0.5%. So if it reduces its cost to 0.5%, so it will be MCLR. So whatever I have discussed. So let us see, everything is written. Suppose Vodafone borrows at floating rate and transfer the floating rate of interest to DLF, and DLF borrows at fixed rate and transfer the fixed rate of interest to Vodafone. They can reduce their total interest outgo by 1.5%. That is what we have done here. So they are borrowing, Vodafone is borrowing at floating rate and DLF is borrowing at fixed rate, and they will transfer the rate of interest. How they transfer the rate of interest, that I will tell you, show you. So they can save 1.5%, assuming that the deal is done through a third party, a swap bank, and if three of them share the saving of 1.5% equally, each gets 0.5%. Which three? Vodafone, DLF and the swap bank, each of them, they share 1.5% equally, so each of them gets 0.5%. So if that happens, Vodafone's cost would have been 12, reduced by 0.5 will come down to 11.5. DLF's cost would have been MCLR plus 0.5, reduced by 0.5, come down to MCLR. And of course, the swap bank gets 0.5%. Up to this, any problem?
No, sir.
So whatever is written, let me just show you. This is DLF, this is Vodafone. Can you see? And this is swap bank.
Yes, sir.
So DLF's cost has reduced to MCLR, Vodafone's cost has reduced to what do you call? Acha, let me, before I show you this slide, acha, let me just okay. Suppose, consider this case. DLF cost is reduced to MCLR, Vodafone's cost is reduced to 11.5%, okay? So swap bank has just let me see.
Sir, I think it's MCLR plus 11.
Which one?
Swap bank's thing. MCLR plus 11 because
No, wait. I'll show you. Oh. Vodafone borrowed at MCLR plus 2%, DLF borrowed as 9%. Up to this is fine.
yes sir.
Now we have calculated Vodafone's cost will be 11.5 and DLF's cost will be MCLR. Just now we calculated
Yes sir.
11.5 and MCLR. Yes or no?
Yes sir.
So now consider this case. DLF's cost is MCLR. DLF pays MCLR to Swap Bank. Vodafone's cost is 11.5. It pays 11.5 to Swap Bank. So how much Swap Bank has?
MCLR plus 11.5.
11. Now DLF borrowed at 9% fixed. DLF borrowed at 9% fixed.
Yes sir.
So Swap Bank pays 9% to DLF, which DLF pays to the lender. Vodafone borrowed at MCLR plus 2%. Swap Bank pays MCLR plus 2% to Vodafone, which it pays to the lender. So it received MCLR plus 11.5, but it is paying 9 plus MCLR plus 2 comes to MCLR plus 11. Remaining 0.5% is with Swap Bank. Is that clear? I repeat, DLF pays MCLR to Swap Bank. Vodafone pays 11.5% to Swap Bank. That is the cost we have calculated. So Swap Bank has MCLR plus 11.5%. Now DLF borrowed at 9. So Swap Bank pays 9% to DLF, which it pays to the lender. Vodafone borrowed at MCLR plus 2. So Swap Bank pays MCLR plus 2% to Vodafone, which it pays to the lender. And the remaining 0.5% is with Swap Bank, which is its profit. We calculated that each of them will get 0.5. So basically what is happening, DLF wanted to borrow in floating, it is paying in floating. Vodafone wanted to borrow in fixed, it is paying in fixed. What is the difference? Difference is DLF, if directly it would have borrowed in floating, it would have paid MCLR plus 0.5. It is paying only MCLR. Vodafone, if it would have borrowed in fixed, it would have paid 12%, but it is paying 11.5. But whatever amount is borrowed by Vodafone, that is actually paid by CDLF. In this entire structure, only one thing which can vary is MCLR. So that is the floating. So DLF is paying that to Swap Bank, which Swap Bank is paying to Vodafone. And Vodafone is paying to the floating rate lender. So DLF is paying floating and Vodafone is paying fixed. So what DLF borrowed fixed rate, that is actually paid by Vodafone. What Vodafone borrowed at floating rate, that is actually paid by, what do you call, DLF. Is that clear? Question confusion? So actually it is becoming, I owe you 100, you owe me 200. So you pay me 200 and then I pay you 100. It is like that. But actual practice, what will happen? Just see this slide. So DLF's cost is MCLR. So DLF pays MCLR to Swap Bank. Swap Bank passes MCLR to Vodafone. Okay. Vodafone borrowed at MCLR plus 2. So Vodafone pays MCLR plus 2% to the floating rate lender. So Vodafone received MCLR but paying MCLR plus 2. So out of the total cost of Vodafone, 2% is already paid. Vodafone's cost we have calculated as 11.5, of which 2 is already paid. So remaining 9.5% it pays to the Swap Bank. Swap Bank keeps 0.5% for itself, pays 9% to DLF, which it pays to the lender. Repeat it from the beginning. DLF's cost is MCLR. You can start with anybody. DLF's cost is MCLR. DLF pays MCLR to Swap Bank. Swap Bank passes this to Vodafone. Vodafone borrowed at MCLR plus 2%. So Vodafone pays MCLR plus 2% to the floating rate lender. Vodafone's cost is 11.5, of which 2 is already paid. Remaining 9.5 it pays to the Swap Bank. Swap Bank keeps 0.5% for itself, pays 9% to DLF, which it pays to the lender. So it's not, I have shown you two structure. It is not that you have to do it within this two structure only. You can have anything else, any other particular kind of structure. So you can start from 11.5% from Vodafone's angle. Suppose Vodafone pays 11.5% to Swap Bank. Swap Bank passes 9% to DLF, which it pays. Again, it pays MCLR. Again, it pays MCLR plus 2%. And any way you can make the structure, as long as the total outgo of DLF is 9% and DLF is MCLR and total outgo of Vodafone is 11.5%. Question, confusion? Should I explain the diagram once again?
Sir, I have a doubt.
Before you have a doubt, you just tell me which one you find better. This one or this one? In the
Second
first
one.
case,
The second one.
second one, this one.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I'll keep this. Sorry. Okay. Chalo, let me keep it. So this is one, this is one. So since I have shown this one first, that is why you liked it. When I saw this one first, people said this one is better. Anyway, so what doubt? Yeah.
Yes, sir. So I wanted to ask, this 1.5% profit that these three companies are making, this is kind of an opportunity cost from the bank from which these
See,
two
first of
companies
all,
are borrowing.
Vodafone borrowed, as I've told you, two companies can be, it is not necessary that Vodafone and DLF, they will know each other. Two companies can be situated at two different places of the world, number one. Number two, it is possible that, as I've told you, banks, they don't know each other. It is possible that there can be more than one swap bank. Suppose Vodafone tells his investment banker, DLF tells his investment banker. Ultimately, the total saving is restricted to, in this structure, 1.5. How they share, it's their problem. Here, one thing you have seen that DLF has an absolute advantage in both the rates. DLF has an absolute advantage in both the rates. You have seen. It is possible that there is a saving out of the saving of 1.5%. Vodafone gets 1% and DLF and the swap bank, they share 0.5%. Since DLF has an absolute advantage, that does not mean DLF will get a higher share. Why? Suppose at this moment there are 10 companies which want to borrow at floating rate, but there is only one company which wants to borrow at fixed rate. So Vodafone is the only company which wants to borrow at fixed, and there are 10 companies which want to borrow at floating. So Vodafone can negotiate and say that whoever gives me a better rate, I want 1%. Whoever gives me a better rate, I'll go with him. That is also possible. Similarly, Swap Bank here, we have assumed that Swap Bank charges on gets a share. It is possible that Swap Bank charges an upfront fee from both the parties, and the saving of 1.5% will be shared by them equally, 0.75. So when we make the ultimate structure, there will be no Swap Bank of 0.5%. So suppose Swap Bank says, I don't want a share. This saving you share among yourself at your terms and condition. I will charge so much to DLF, I will charge so much to Vodafone. Swap Bank gets his fees and goes. Swap Bank does not have any responsibility if there is any default. So of course there is a risk of counterparty default. What do you mean by this? That is, if any of them becomes bankrupt, only thing you have to see, the one thing here can change, that is MCLR. Suppose MCLR goes up, so Vodafone ultimately is paying. Suppose MCLR goes up. DLF borrowed at fixed rate at 9%. So MCLR becomes more than 9%. So DLF can think, why should I pay so much? Because this lender does not know Vodafone. This lender does not know Swap Bank. He knows only DLF. Suppose MCLR goes beyond 9%, DLF pays directly to fixed rate and forgets this. So Vodafone will be losing. On the other hand, suppose MCLR goes down, Vodafone thinks that why should I pay unnecessarily more? Let me pay the floating rate lender. So DLF will be losing. So of course, if one of them does not pay, it will also not receive. Other will also not pay. But the important thing is there is a counterparty risk here. So that when you enter into the swap, you have to bear this counterparty risk. Swap bank does not assume any responsibility. Swap bank will only help you to make the deal. So this is one part. Second part is, as I've told you, that is, it is very much possible that there may be more than one swap bank, and it depends upon their terms and conditions. So they will share the profit or loss, and of course you have an absolute advantage. That does not mean you will get a higher share. The other party can also get a higher share. So whatever we have discussed, everything is written here. So that is, Vodafone will borrow 100 crores at MCLR plus 2%, and DLF will borrow 100 crores at 9%, and they will swap the interest rate. DLF will pay MCLR to swap bank will pass that to Vodafone. Vodafone will pay MCLR plus 2% to the floating rate lender, and floating rate lender. Vodafone will pay 9.5% to swap bank will keep 0.5% for itself and pass 9% to DLF, which will pay to the lender. So the cost is also calculated here. So let me just alternative one. Let me change the color of the slide. Later on I will do. This is alternative solution written. Okay. So here you have this thing. Cost to both the parties. DLF is paying PLR, receiving 9%, paying 9%. So cost is only PLR. Vodafone receiving PLR, paying PLR plus 2%, and again paying 9.5%. So total cost is 11.5%. Swap bank gets 0.5%. Question, confusion?
Sir, can you please change PLR to MCLR?
Oh. This slide I actually missed out. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Question, confusion?
No, sir.
So I think last class I have uploaded the till your basics to options in the Teams calculations.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you have any question, swap will not be there in your today's what do you call midterm.
Sir, how many questions will be there, and what's the pattern?
All MCQs, number of questions I